You know that feeling when you walk out of a performance review and you're just completely confused? Your manager hands you a 3 out of 5 for teamwork, but you have absolutely no idea what that actually means, let alone how to improve it. Well, you definitely aren't alone. In today's explainer, we're decoding the modern performance appraisal. We're going to see exactly how companies are finally removing the guesswork from your performance review using something called the BARS method. Let's dive right in.
So let's start with this famous management quote from Peter Drucker: "What gets measured gets managed." It's incredibly simple, but it highlights a massive foundational problem in human resources. If we actually want to manage employee performance, we have to measure it accurately, right? But for decades, managers have been trying to measure incredibly complex human actions using completely vague terms. And just like Drucker points out, if your measurement is fuzzy, well, your management is going to be fuzzy too.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question we're exploring today. How do you actually, objectively, measure workplace behavior? I mean, if traditional reviews rely on vague, subjective opinions from your boss, things like needs work or exceeds expectations, how do we measure what someone actually does on a random Tuesday afternoon? How do we strip away the personal opinion and just look at the cold, hard facts? That is the exact problem the BARS method is built to solve.
Here's a quick look at our agenda for today. We'll cover 1. The performance review problem. 2. What BARS actually is. 3. Building a BARS system. 4. BARS versus traditional ratings. And 5. BARS in modern workplaces.
All right, Section 1, the performance review problem and the deep flaws of subjectivity.
So why do standard appraisals end up frustrating employees and failing managers? Honestly, it all comes down to human psychology. Traditional ratings are absolutely plagued by cognitive errors. Take the halo effect, for instance. This is when you do one thing really well. Maybe you're amazing at public speaking, so your manager subconsciously gives you top scores in everything else, like punctuality, even if you're actually terrible at it. Or think about leniency bias, where a manager just wants to play the nice guy so everyone gets a high score. Then you have central tendency, where the manager plays it super safe and gives everyone an unhelpful middle-of-the-road 3 out of 5. All of these frustrating errors happen because traditional reviews evaluate personality traits instead of concrete, observable actions.
Moving on to Section 2, what is BARS? Bridging the gap.
To fix these deeply ingrained biases, we have to find a way to bridge the gap between subjective opinion and objective measurement. And surprisingly, the solution isn't brand new. We have to go back to 1963, when Patricia Kane Smith and Lauren M. Kendall developed a highly structured solution. BARS stands for Behaviourally Anchored Rating Scale. Basically, it's a technique where every single point on a rating scale is anchored, literally tied down, to specific real-world examples of behavior. BARS completely changes the game because it links a numerical rating directly to an observable action. It takes a vague concept like teamwork and translates it into concrete data.
The fundamental shift we're talking about here is huge. Think about it. A traditional appraisal flows from a manager's subjective opinion and ends up being, well, a guess. BARS, on the other hand, relies entirely on undeniable actions. It flows straight from your observed behavior into an objective fact. Instead of a manager's mood dictating your entire review, you either performed the specific action described on the scale or you didn't. End of story.
Let's look at Section 3, building a BARS system, the step-by-step process.
So how do you actually build one of these? It sounds great in theory, sure, but creating a system that measures objective behavior is tough. It requires a really strict 6-step process. First, you have to identify the specific job, let's say a software engineer. Step 2 is absolutely crucial, collecting critical incidents. These are specific, real-life examples of highly effective or highly ineffective behaviors that have actually happened on the job. You then group these incidents into dimensions, like coding efficiency. In Step 4, you write clear behavioral statements based on those incidents. Step 5, you assign those statements to a scale, like 1 to 5. And finally, boom, you have your final BARS tool.
To really wrap our heads around this, let's look at a customer service executive. Notice how crystal clear this is. A 5-star rating isn't just your boss patting your back and saying excellent work. No, it specifically requires the behavior of resolving customer complaints independently. If you sometimes need a bit of help, you drop to a 4, solves most issues with minimal supervision. And down at a 1, it's not some vague needs improvement label. It is explicitly defined as unable to resolve complaints, customer dissatisfaction is common. So if you get a 2, you aren't left guessing why. The scale literally tells you you require frequent guidance to solve problems. It sets a standard that everyone can understand.
Now for Section 4, bars versus traditional ratings, weighing the options.
With that example in mind, let's stack these methods side by side. The advantages of bars are pretty undeniable. Traditional ratings evaluate your traits, basically who you are. Bars evaluates your observable behavior, what you actually do. Because of this, bars offers incredibly high objectivity. Think about the feedback loop here. Would you rather have general feedback that leaves you guessing or highly specific feedback tailored directly to your job? Bars gives you the specific feedback, and it practically eliminates personal bias in the process. It's just a much fairer system.
But, and this is a really big but, we have to talk about the limitations. Bars is not some magic wand. The main thing to remember is that it's incredibly time-consuming and expensive to build. Remember that strict 6-step process? You literally have to do that for every single job role in the company. You need a completely unique, expertly crafted scale for a customer service rep, a different one for an accountant, and a totally different one for a project manager. For large organizations, creating and maintaining all these separate scales takes a massive amount of resources. All right, our final section, Section 5, bars in modern workplaces, the AI and hybrid era. Despite those heavy setup costs, the corporate world is shifting, and bars is actually making a huge comeback. Today, it operates as this beautiful, continuous logical loop. It starts with observed behavior. That behavior is checked against the behavioral anchors. That generates a fair, totally objective performance rating. But here's the best part. It doesn't stop there. Because the rating is tied to specific behaviors, managers can give incredibly targeted feedback. That precise feedback highlights exactly what skills you're missing, which leads to highly specific training, which ultimately drives real career development. It's an engine for continuous growth, not just an annual report card.
And we're not just talking theory here, folks. Look at the massive corporate adopters. Tech giants like Accenture, Infosys, and Tata Consultancy Services are leading the charge on this. They're actually abandoning those dreaded old-school annual ratings. Instead, they're leaning into continuous behavior-based feedback. Infosys, for example, evaluates things like collaboration and innovation using very specific behavior-based indicators. TCS is emphasizing learning agility. They're using the core principles of bars to fairly manage huge global workforces.
Looking ahead to HR trends for 2025 and beyond, technology is literally solving the main limitation of BRAS, the time and cost to manage it. By integrating AI-enabled performance systems and advanced analytics, organizations can now track this continuous behavioral feedback effortlessly. Plus, think about the rise of hybrid work. Managers can't always physically see you at your desk anymore. They desperately need objective, continuous feedback on your output, making modern AI-powered BRIS the absolute perfect tool for today's distributed teams.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to consider for your own career. As the workplace evolves so rapidly into this AI-driven, hybrid model, you really have to ask yourself, are you still being judged by subjective opinions, or is your performance finally grounded in objective reality? Are your skills being accurately measured so they can actually be managed? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I hope this helps you completely decode your next performance review.